Welcome to Future Ready Live, where we talk about topics that will help CPAs, CGMAs, finance and accounting professionals prepare for change and transformation. I'm your host, Tom Hood, the Executive Vice President for Business Engagement and Growth at AICPA SEMA, the largest association of professional accountants, CPAs, and CGMAs in the world. Today, we're going to be talking about the great join, accounting and finance, an employer's perspective. And we're flipping our format where I'm going to be interviewed by our academic in residence, Jan Taylor Morris, CPA, CGMA, and PhD, joined by our colleague representing public accounting, Mike Decker, the VP of CPA examination and pipeline. Jan, take it away.
Thanks, Tom. Before we get started, let me set the stage for today's discussion. So Tom, Mike, and I are going to be presenting during the American Accounting Association's annual meeting during the first week of August on today's topic. For those of you in the academic community, we hope to see you during our session to continue this important discussion. And for those of you tuning in today who will not be attending the American Accounting Association meeting, but would like a deeper dive into some of these concepts, please put your email in the chat and we will follow up with resources. So now let's get started. So the title of our presentation at the annual meeting of AAA is The Great Join, Examining the Future of Finance and Accounting from the Employer Perspective. Tom, can you kind of tell us what we mean by the Great Join?
So, Jan, it's interesting because in my role here at the association, I'm primarily responsible for management accounting or corporate accounting, CFOs, controllers in businesses, as opposed to public accounting, which is the practice of public accountancy, right? Auditors, etc. So last May, after I started with the association, I began an outreach to large public company CFOs to really understand the issues coming out of the pandemic. And one by one, they all said essentially the same thing. The pandemic had accelerated all the major trends that were happening pre-pandemic, right before 2020, and added a few more like DEI, ESG, remote work. I mean, we'll talk about that later. But that led us to convening what we're now calling our Future of Finance Leadership Advisory Group. And this group representing about 40 plus key finance leaders, CFOs, global controllers, from companies like Walmart, Stanley Black & Decker, Swiss Re, Merck Pharma, IBM, Verizon, Nike, we can go on. But that group has met about 12 times now. And in the early phases of that, one of our members, the CFO of Walmart, actually, he said it this way. He said he's thinking that this automation accelerated a whole lot of the automation of accounting, and that created a need and an opportunity for the distinct core accounting skills plus analytical finance skills around finance, and he called it the Great Join, the joining of accounting and finance. One of our members, Rita Karachin, the global controller for Merck, added that in her experience, the accountants were the ones who were able to pick up the finance analytical skills much better than the finance majors could actually incorporate and learn the fundamentals of accounting. That's what we mean by this great join.
Okay. So why do you think all of this is happening now?
Well, I think it's it's the impact of all this accelerated stuff. Like during the pandemic, we looked at some of the trends. E-commerce, for example, accelerated by 10 years from the first year of the pandemic. Combined with that, projections and forecasting. So finance teams, right, they're supporting their business. So at the minute the pandemic shut everything down, the CEOs coming in saying, what's our projections going to look like next week, right? It was supposed to be 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And we know how that went. 2 weeks became 4, became 8 months, became 2 years. So in that method, during that period, finance folks were actually, accounting and finance folks were actually asked to increase their projections by 30 times than any other time prior to the pandemic. That required all these new skills and highlighted what we now know as a talent performance skills gap. And that's where all this conversation about upskilling, the joining of accounting and finance, and those kind of things are coming from.
So, Mike, let's bring you into this conversation. Do you want to respond to some of what Mike is saying and weigh in on the trends you're seeing in public accounting?
Yeah, and I think what Tom is seeing on the management accounting side, on the CGMA side, we're definitely seeing on the public accounting side. I think just automation, offshoring, outsourcing of sort of not basic accounting tasks, but sort of everyday accounting, has been happening and potentially has been accelerated through the pandemic. Clearly, the needs from the firms from a public accounting perspective is in still a strong foundation is required of core accounting knowledge and skills and the like. But I agree with Tom. More importantly, what we're seeing is a greater need for higher order skills, right? For analytical skills. So what does the accounting mean? And as somewhat of a data analyst myself, it's interesting to hear CPA say, what do you mean data analytics? I've been doing data analytics as an accountant my whole career, right? So it's not necessarily the accounting, but it's what does it mean? And how do you apply it? And what business decisions need to be made? So I think what we're hearing from the firms is they want that higher order skill. They want comfort with technology, comfort with data analytics, comfort with analytical skills. They can help you with the basic accounting, and a lot of that is automated. But what does it mean? And how does a business react, to sort of what's happening?
So it sounds like there's a lot of commonality really in what we're talking about, regardless of whether you're going to work in business and industry or whether you're going to work in public accounting. You still have to have some of those, tech savvy skills. You need to have that ability to, think critically, maybe problem solving. It kind of sounds like a lot of what you were looking at. And this talent performance skills gap that you mentioned, Tom, I know that we're certainly, as a former academic and one who now oversees our academic area, this has been the thing that we've tried to speak to our educators about primarily, is that we've got to start incorporating more of what these employers are saying into our classroom. So with that, Tom, can you tell us a little bit about what those employers are saying?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So a couple of things that our group created a vision for what they think finance and accounting will look like in 2030. This is again from that corporate or management accounting perspective, and they said things like we're going to be moving from being reactive to proactive, right? From reporting what happened to helping to project and anticipate what's going to happen. Back to what Mike said about being able to tell the story about what the numbers mean, and maybe more importantly, what they mean as you look into the future. Now, they also highlighted the emphasis that all of that means we have to stay true to the ethics, trust, and kind of core pieces that are the foundation of the CPA and the CGMA in terms of trust. So it's like, yes, a lot of things will be automated, and yes, we'll be doing a lot of future-oriented work, but at the same time, we got to make sure the numbers are right and that they're reliable, and that's that kind of core accounting discipline Jan, they're talking about. They also said, this is interesting because we've been talking to a couple of these major employers, and they said, here are the new skills we need. We call it the T-shaped professional, and this is true. We're finding in both public accounting and corporate accounting, but it's this idea of building on our strong technical foundation of accounting, obviously throw in some data and tech savvy there, and then build on top of it like a crossbar, what we call boundary crossing competence. This gets us to a T-shaped professional, and skills like leadership and sense making, strategic and critical thinking, as you just mentioned, Jan, communication and storytelling, that's another big one, integration and collaboration, and anticipating and serving evolving needs. Those skills kind of cross boundaries inside an organization, or in a public accounting firm, they cross the different functions like tax, audit, consulting. Same idea, right? We're in a much more collaborative, integrated world. So those are the skills they're saying. And it's funny because they also say, well, not only do we want them in our entry level kind of graduates or people coming in from colleges, but we also need them inside our finance team as it is now. In fact, we need to upskill people. One was a senior director in a really big finance group, and she's like, I need some of those skills. So that's kind of where we're seeing this all go.
But Tom, we accountants love our T shapes. So, so especially as educators, those T accounts, we live and die by them, don't we? So, Mike, let's see, how does this compare with what you're hearing from the firms and the public accounting
Yeah,
recruiters?
I was going to say what he said, what Tom said, but no, very similar. And a lot of that change of including both data and technology and analytics into the CPA exam is one of the reasons why we've moved forward with CPA Evolution. The exposure draft is out, effective late June on a 90-day period, and we will be launching CPA Evolution, with a core concept of three core sections and then three discipline sections, and that'll go live in January of 24. But so in addition to the core, those three other sections were heavily focused on data and technology. How is data structured? How does it flow through an organization? Is the data complete? Is it reliable? Is it available? How do you use it appropriately for decision making, and what decisions can you make from that data? Did the data come from a reliable source? Can you depend on it? And is it the right data? Which is especially keen, as Tom mentioned, in an auditing space, especially for young CPAs. We're still tool agnostic, so we realize a lot of students use different and leverage different data analytic tools, but they've got to know sort of how to apply the analysis that they do, regardless of what tool that they use. So heavily focused on that. And then I think just given increased use of systems throughout businesses, a heavy focus on IT systems, internal controls, just ensuring that the data that you're collecting and the technology that's there is accurate, reliable, and just pertinent to all that you do. So it sounds quite similar.
Absolutely. So it sounds like then, when you're talking about the kind of skills that the employers are needing in today's accounting and finance functions, that we are seeing a lot of synergy, and so again, from an academic point of view, that is pleasing, to hear, because I know that when I'm training my students, I don't necessarily, want to train them to go into one particular area, unless they're in a specialized, track, obviously. But most students, as we're taking their principles of accounting, their intermediate accounting, they're not necessarily sure whether they want to go, to work in public accounting or in business and industry. So is there anything else, Mike, that you're hearing from the employers in terms of, those brand new recruits, out of school that, really maybe is missing currently that they would like to see more of?
Yeah, great question. I think one of the things that we're hearing is that there's a perception issue with public accounting and with work in the firms. I think the firms have done an incredible job, and clearly there's still more work to do, but they've done an incredible job in helping to promote a strong culture, helping to be an employer of choice, helping to provide necessary training and support. And it's not just busy season and hundreds or thousands of hours annually, but I think there is a work-life balance and a clear emphasis on meeting the students where they are, both from a cultural and a diversity perspective. The CAQ just recently issued a report stating that today's students want opportunities in becoming entrepreneurs, growth, culture, stability, belonging. And honestly, I can't think of another profession that can literally guarantee those kinds of that kind of culture than securing the CPA and having a strong basis in accounting. We used to talk about it as a destination, and I think the CPA is really just a door opener. It's about the journey and what happens when you become a CPA. Not, hey, I got it, I'm done. It's more what doors open for you long term. So maybe don't believe everything you hear. Get the core accounting background. Find another area that you're interested in. Insurance, tax, law, supply chain, analytics. There's so many different opportunities, and I don't know if the world's your oyster, but clearly a lot of opportunities out there.
Right. So it sounds like, Mike, what I'm hearing you say is what some of us have been saying all along is we've kind of got to change our stories, the stories that we tell. So for those, that really want to promote accounting as a career choice, we do. And Tom, that goes back to what you were saying about storytelling, right? As part of our, T-shaped skill sets and competencies, that we need to be able to tell the story of accounting and tell it in an exciting, innovative way, as opposed to the, I worked 80 hours and, didn't have a life kind of stories that, we all love to tell, to be honest. So Tom, anything you want to add to that in terms of what you're hearing?
Well, I think Mike's exactly right. I was a CPA coming out of college, so that was my first entry into the career, and I actually didn't do any public accounting. So I stayed in corporate my whole time, then picked up the CGMA. I think to your point, this whole accounting career, and I would argue we should start calling it accounting and finance, not the finance that gets you to Wall Street, which is often what many people think about, but just understanding financial analytics, because it's more and more important. And I want to give you two examples that, to me, make this exciting field of accounting and finance, CPA and CGMA, super exciting. Is look at the current trends with ESG, environmental social governance, and inflation that we're all dealing with. Both of these are going to put the underscore of having that strong analytical background, but knowing that the numbers are right and moving forward. And back to what Rita Karachin from Merck Pharmaceuticals said, she goes, for our accounting people, they can learn the skills in finance easier than the finance people can learn the fundamentals that are involved in that whole language of business called accounting. So for all of the future CPA, CGMAs out there, I think this is a truly defining moment for us, and time to really rethink about this career in a new and different way.
All right. Well, I know one of the things that my team is working on, we are at the AICPA, we have this thing called a pre-certification core competency framework. I also know that we have a CGMA framework. And so we are in the process of reinvigorating, updating our pre-certification core competency framework. We're giving it a new name, to be honest. So we want to look at what are some of those fundamental competencies that our students, as they become graduates of our accounting program, what should they be looking into? And I think this discussion is just informing that work. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you guys have said. So we just have another, minute or so. So I wanted to ask you, Mike, have you heard anything about, doing away with accounting, as a separate field? I know there's been some discussion out there. Tom's been talking about accounting and finance, so what have you heard? How do you respond to what you've heard?
Yeah, I've heard some comments that, we need to do away with accounting just as maybe a core curriculum. I'm not sure the implications of that, but to me, it's like, I would say it's almost like any other major, whether it's accounting or marketing. it's always best to complement that core with either areas of interest or areas of a specialty, or at least get, maybe it's like your main course and some sides, right? It's always nice to have a couple sides to see what you like, and to sort of broaden your knowledge, and just kind of figure out not only what you're interested in, but where does your passion lie, and how you can apply your base knowledge. So I do think, and whether it needs to be its own curriculum or not, I do think building on core accounting with other areas, including, again, technology, IT, data analytics, is critically important, because I think accounting as a sole, not career, but task, is a lot of that is automated. So again, it goes back to, what are you doing with that information? What are you doing with that financial information? What implications does it have, either in an audit, in a tax situation, or for a company looking to invest? So it's almost like you got to know step one and step two. And how the curriculum is set up to best manage it, I'm not sure, but I think that's what today's students need to know.
All right. Thank you. Tom, any final thoughts on that?
I think Mike said it well, and I think it gets back to that whole T shape. You want somebody that's got that crossbar on top of these deep accounting fundamentals that are critical to running a business. It's the language of business, so we've got to have that as the foundation, I think, going forward. So
Well, I think that using the T-shape to close us out is a great way to do that. Again, as we're closing out today, I want to remind you, for those of you that will be in San Diego in August, that we'd love to have you join us at our session at AAA. I think there's going to be details about it coming up and in the chat. So we hope to see you there and continuing this conversation.
Jan, you might have a job doing this as we go forward. This was awesome. So it's certainly an honor and privilege to have Jan Taylor Morris and Mike Decker on the show this week. And for more with Jan Taylor Morris, you can follow her on LinkedIn, looking at Jan Taylor CPA CGMA PhD. And then for Mike Decker, look for him on LinkedIn at MA Decker. So you can follow those folks to keep up with us. We'll be probably putting messages out from the AAA in August.
Yep.
And again, for everyone else, thank you for joining us today. And don't miss our other Future Ready live sessions back here on LinkedIn the first and third Tuesday of each month at noon Eastern. See you then. Thank you.